Hi. Hey, Keith. Well, like he said, my name is Alma Hoffman, and I work currently at Indiana University -- Purdue University Fort Wayne. It's IPFW. We are a Venn diagram. Part of us are Indiana University, part of us are Purdue University, and all the same campus. It gets messy and disorganized, but that's how it is down there. So I'm going to talk to you about productive doodling and how this has become a big movement among designers and user experience designers, etc. But before we get to that, I'm sure you have heard or you know people who draw pictures all day, right? You know those students or people who are constantly drawing pictures. And what is it that we think about them when we see that? I mean, and let's just put it out there. What do we think? Yeah, they're not paying attention, and that's a kind thought, because we can think other things, right? That would be one of the nicest things that we have in our heads when we see people, I mean, doodling or doing pictures in front of us. And I will tell you how I came around from that, even though I'm a visual learner too, and I used to draw pictures all of my life, and I was one of those kids who would fill the desk with pictures and doodles, and I would make sure I would erase them before leaving the classroom, because everybody knew it was going to be me. So somehow I got away from that, and I started to take notes in a very traditional way, you know, and it was fatiguing. I mean, you can never ever capture every single word a speaker is saying, right? And you're like, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? By the time you get what did he say, you have lost another 20 words. And it was always a struggle. But I was in that mode until 2009, and I will explain to you very soon about that. So when we hear people that, oh yeah, I draw pictures all day, we're like, really, how does that work? And we have this skeptic look, and you know, yeah, really, whatever, you know, you don't do anything, you don't do much. In fact, we designers we always have the question, well, what is it what you do? You do pictures all day, right? That's all you do, that's all you do. We have this sense of what we do is not as in-depth or as important as other people, and you know, we do work a lot, you know, designers, we do work a lot. We have a lot of students who will say to us, I learn better by seeing things, and it's just not that, it's just that they also want you to hold their hand and take them there and hold the pencil for them and put the pencil down for them and take them to the library, because they seem to be unable to do anything, and they self-diagnose as visual learners. Never mind, they have never taken a test, a psychological test to determine how they learn. They will tell you, I learn better by seeing. And they know this with this authority, and you're like, everybody does. Like, it's not just you. And, you know, you tell them about, you have to read this many chapters, excuse me. And you tell them you have to listen to the lecture. How come? What? Again? I have to sit there for how long? Oh. And then you tell them you have to do math? That's the enemy. Like, what? I cannot use a calculator? Are you serious? And write a paper? That's the worst one. Like, how many words do you want there? How many paragraphs? How many pages? You know, do you have a certain format that you want? I mean, can we do this in 12-point times or 14-point times, you know, and stuff like that? And you're like, no, 10 points, and, you know, this and that. But the chief enemy for a student, traditionally, not everybody, but most of the students, will be the lectures. So if the lectures are this way, they're going to go that way. And they just drag their feet and their backs, and you see them walking like this, like with this heaviness, as if you're killing them for sitting there in the lecture. But they just feel it's very boring. And they sigh, and they doodle. And this is a doodle done in one of my lectures. And now, granted, I teach about design, so it was a lecture that had to do with design. But one of my students, without knowing that I'm doing this type of research on doodling and stuff, she was doing these little pictures. And then when she came to talk to me about something else, I saw it, and I said, can I have a copy? She gave it to me, and this is what she was doodling: lampshades with type. You know, I'm like, well, that's very creative, but it didn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. And then we have, you know, this notion that doodling in class is a bad thing. We have grown with that feeling, we have grown with that sense, and we have been told, I have been told, you cannot doodle in the class. My mother would tell me, you need to be a good student and sit there, pay attention, and not do anything. The problem is that when you tell a child to stay quiet like a cadaver, that's not going to happen. That just doesn't happen. But that's how we're taught. Linda Silverman, she's the director of the Institute for the Study of Advanced Development and the Gifted Development Center. She has stated that 37% of the population are visual learners. If 37% of people are visual learners, it stands to reason that the best way for those people to gain information will be to make their own pictures. But we have sort of removed that from the equation. We have taught people you cannot do that. Writing is good, but doodling is not. But however, this is not something that is strange to us as a civilization. Our ancestors doodle, and cave paintings are pretty much doodles, stick figures, doing things that they were doing, communicating to each other with pictures what they were doing. So making pictures is not something strange to us, but we have made it something strange to us. Presidents doodle, and there's a book, it's called Presidents Who Doodle, Presidential Doodles. This is a doodle by Ronald Reagan. And as you can see, even Ronald Reagan does little hearts with Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan down there, you know? So this is the President of the United States who's doodling in his meetings. Famous writers like Mark Twain doodled, and this is one of his little sketches for writing, and you can see all these little pictures, etc. Bill Gates doodles, and this doodle is actually very funny because this is done in the, yes? Not just because of the content of the doodle, but this was done in a big meeting, international meeting in England, and he happened to be sitting next to Tony Blair, the then Prime Minister. People thought that that doodle belonged to Tony Blair. It got leaked to the press, and poor Tony Blair was smeared on the press as a pathetic person, incapable to lead, and all of these things that were said about him. You can Google this, it's really fascinating. But then they found out that it was Bill Gates. Oops. And poor Tony Blair had gone through all this smear, and he was actually Bill Gates doodling about Apple, his chief enemy. Picasso doodled, and he was not afraid to do little pictures. Now, we have this sense that if Picasso does it, it must be a work of art. But I mean, come on, we go to museums. I'm a designer, I appreciate art as much as any other artist, and I go to museums and I go to galleries, and sometimes, honestly, right, the question we have in our heads, why is that here? I can do that better. I mean, my kid can do that, and he can do it better, and with color. And we're like, yeah, it's because it's Picasso. Yes, it's Picasso. But the point is that he had a very prolific life. He was not afraid of making doodles. He continued to sketch, and he kept his mind fresh and his creativity fresh because of it. Leonardo doodled, and we know of all of his notebooks full of diagrams about flying machines and womb of a mother, etc. I mean, this is a sketch of a fetus inside a womb. This is what he would do all the time. I have a book of all of his sketches, and it's amazing. It's very, very rich. It turns out that the way we have trained people to sit in a lecture is contrary to what we're supposed to be doing. We are wired to empathize. We are wired to connect. Carol Jeffers, professor at California State University, wrote an article, a journal on empathy, the mirror neuron system and art education. And she says that empathy is a function of the brain. There's actually certain neurons in your brain that sort of compel you to interact, to engage, to do something, to create, to interact with the world kinesthetically, not just by sitting there, but doing something about it. I mean, think about it this way. When you go to a museum or gallery and you see a piece that calls your attention, what is the one thing you want to do? And be honest, what is the one thing you want to do? Touch it, right? I do touch them, let me tell you. I wait for the guards to go, and I go, and I wait, and I, walk around, and, like nothing, and then I get very close. I wait for them to be gone, and I do this. And I want to feel it. It's a way for me to own it. We are supposed to be doing that. We're supposed to extend ourselves. However, we have decided that that's not a good idea. Yet all the research is out there. So why, if we're wired to do that, why students seem to be not, to be so inattentive and not really care about what we're saying or doing? And let me tell you, there's nothing more discouraging. We're very narcissistic as professors. We want their undying attention and loyalty from the students. I want them to be like this. Yeah, and you are God to me, right? But no, we're not God to them. We're like, whatever. And you're like, I spent hours suffering through this lecture to give it to you, and you're just there. But we actually have trained them, and we have been trained to train them to be that way. And you're going to say, what? We have trained them? Yes, we're guilty of that. This is what we think of a nice classroom. This is what our idea of a good, well-behaved classroom. People who are sitting in a row, doing everything very quietly, not questioning, not moving, not whispering, not nothing. You can hear a pin, right? And Joseph Novak, professor emeritus at Cornell University, has said that we have engaged in a pattern of learning that simply requires memorization of information with no evaluation and no interaction with the information given to them. What we want them is to be recipients, vessels of our knowledge, and not do much about it. We want them to learn it, but we don't encourage them that interaction that allows them to actually assimilate and learn and own that information. And this is what we have when we go to lectures, not too different from that. So they go from being children doing that to being college students, not very dissimilar. They're doing the same thing, just sitting there in a row. He says that we have taught to them, for them, everything what we teach them is a cacophony of information to memorize, and they usually find this boring. I mean, and who can blame him? We do too. When we go to a meeting and we have to listen, don't we find the meetings boring? I mean, let's be honest, we do. I mean, do we have to go to them? And then we joke before the meeting, do we have to go to this meeting? What are they going to say today? You know, what is it about? And then we walk out of the meeting, oh my goodness, this meeting, I can never take back that hour, etc. We know these things, right? But yet we don't seem to empathize with the students. But let me give you a walk to memory land. Around 1990 something, late 90s and beginning of 2000, there was this explosion of PowerPoint, PDF, and Keynote came later. And no lecture was given without a PowerPoint. PowerPoint was the key. And everything had to be PowerPoint. We went from simple introductions of a project or lecture and let the students work to these fancy PowerPoint presentations. And I got into that, and I wanted to, because I'm a designer, they needed to be designed, and all of that was an opportunity to design things, right? But then what happens? This is what happens. They don't pay attention. Worse, they don't take notes because you're going to upload it to Blackboard anyway. Why should I take notes? I mean, can you give us copies of it? Because if I get a copy, I can learn better. They don't study them. They want the copy just because, I don't know, because they don't even read them. And then they ask you questions, and I'm like, it is on the copy I gave you. But they, no. And then around 2009, I decided I'm not going to give lectures like that anymore. I'm not going to keep copies to anybody. If they want to pay attention, they're going to have to write or they're going to have to do something with it. So I don't facilitate the copies anymore. And I came across this book by Dan Rom, The Back of the Napkin. This changed my perception and brought me back to my roots. He's a business strategist, and this is his website. And he uses visual thinking to help companies and corporations to solve strategy problems. And what he does and how he does is simple stick figures, diagrams, etc., etc. So he makes the whole process of the meeting very, very visual. And he has proven that it's a lot easier for companies to understand where the problems are, where the weaknesses are, and come up with a strategy. And the entire book is about that. He has written other 2 books. He's great.